evening, everybody. My name is Michael Menduno. I'm the editor-in-chief of In-Depth Magazine. I hope it's a magazine that you all read. It's online. You can find it at indepth, one word, .blog. So please, if you haven't seen it, go over and look at it. Very excited to be here today. I want to thank you all for coming to the webinar. And in particular, I want to thank our many supporters, GUE, Patty, International Training, RAID, ESA, of course, Dan Europe, and Temp Deox Products for being here. I also want to thank the Blue and Blue Dive Club and Video Solutions who are producing our webinar today. So the title, of course, of our webinar is Gas Analysis is Not Sexy, but it will save your assets. And in particular, we want to focus on understanding both, not yet, one sec, the causes, understand the causes and risks of getting contaminants in your gas and what you can do about it as a diver or a dive center. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we start, I want to have a little aside. So in preparing for the workshop, I began by calling some of our supporters, and I called my friend Paul Toomer, who of course is the president of RAID. And I said, Paul, are you going to be in the workshop? He goes, mate, we are, but I disagree. I said, huh? He goes, gas analysis is sexy, mate. It is sexy. And so I got to say, these are the people, right? So during the pandemic and lockdown, RAID created a virtual nitrox analyzer to go with their e-learning courses, where you can actually calibrate your analyzer and then grade it for various forms of nitrox and all. So these people do think it's a sexy topic. Unfortunately, their nitrox analyzer doesn't detect contaminants, which we're going to be talking about today. So I'd like to get started by introducing our two guests, our domain experts, or as you could call them, our domain Obi-Wans. And that would be, I'll start with Eugenio Mongelli. Eugenio is the founder and CEO of Temp Deox Products. Temp's been around for a quarter of a century. This does not make Eugenio old, though. He started the company when he was just a teenager. And he's also he's also a rebreather and technical diving instructor. And then, of course, I'd like to introduce Dr. Alessandro Marroni. Dr. Marroni is, of course, a hyperbaric medical physician and also scientist. And, of course, he is the founder and CEO of Dan Europe. Thank you both for being here today to put on this webinar. Before I turn it over to Eugenio, though, one thing. The presentation is going to last about 40 to 45 minutes. And at that point, then we're going to have a roundtable discussion to answer your questions. So if you have questions while you're watching the presentation, just type them into your space bar there. And our friends at Video Solutions will be harvesting the questions and then present them, and we'll go through them in the order that we got them at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Eugenio. Take it away, sir.
Thank you, Mike, for introducing me, and thanks, Alessandro, for having joined us in this adventure. I'm very excited being here tonight or today. I'm sorry, because we are broadcasting live, and then we have friends around the world watching us. That's very exciting for us. And I would like just to start saying that we started this this webinar just in a funny way, because we were contacted by some friend of us saying, hey, why don't we share some information we have about the gas, the contamination, and what's happening in the gas. And then we decided to do that. Then we contacted Michael and we contacted Alessandro, and then we are here now, talking and sharing our experience. Of course, please, we don't want to bother you, so place as much question you have, and we will be very happy to reply, and also later on in a private chat or in Facebook, wherever, And Alessandro and Michael, please, during my speech, jump in with no problem, and then let's talk with, let's start. Okay, Mauro, please, can you just put the presentation? Can we start? Okay, here we go. So we started with this, the title. Just two questions, two words on the titles. When we go to the exhibition, to the show around the world, we are attracted by beautiful suits, golden regulator, new computer, but gas analysis is a bit boring, of course, but we are used to say that it sometimes really save your assets, and then I thank Michael for finding this proper term. And then, okay, we tonight we want to say and to tell you something about, the gas analysis and what's happening. Next, please. Okay, go ahead. Avanti. Oh, yes. So what we say is that the gas analysis is a prerequisite of safety. That means that gas analysis should be on top of all our priority, because it is the air that we are going to breathe. It is the air or the gas, the mixed gas that we are going to use for supporting our life underwater. And this is why you must be sure. And this is something that you give, as a normal thing. You don't think about that. You think, okay, I'm getting a cylinder from the diving center. I assume that the air is good. There is no contamination inside. But unfortunately, not always is like that. There are some bad situation in which you can get and you can have some kind of contaminants inside. So in this way, there are regulation, there are rules, there are something that we can do, and also for protecting ourselves, protecting our loves, of course, but also to see what's happening in the diving center where we are going, in the diving center that we are using the service. There are many technologies available for being sure, because there are some instruments that you may use for that, and there are also the procedure to apply for being sure that you are breathing in a proper way. Mauro, next, please. Okay, we start with the regulation, and around the world there are many regulations. There is also a history of the regulation, because we started around 50 years ago with very basic technology for detecting what's happening on the gas, and then of course there are local regulations that are issued by the government, by the local administration, and also there are of course technical and safety rules that must be followed by the provider of the gas that is going to give you the gas that you are going to use. Mauro, next, please. Okay, the most important regulation around the world are three, let me say. One is the EN 12021. That is a norm which is update in 2014 that gives you the limits of the contaminants into the air and the gas, like trimix, nitrox, that you're going to use. Then the really holy Bible is the U.S. Navy diving manual, because in the diving manual there are stated exactly which is the limits, and then there are other local regulations, like the Italian one. We have the 11366 that is for protection of commercial divers and hyperbaric industry, and that gives you the limits of the contaminants. Okay, let's go through and let's screw down what is, Mauro, the next, please. And then we see what is stated on the EN 12021. First of all is oxygen. Oxygen in air must be 21% plus minus 1%. That is not so difficult to reach, also because the contaminants are very low amount that won't affect the oxygen. And carbon monoxide, that is the main topic of this of our speech tonight, is about the must be below 5 ppm. Ppm is a term, is a very technical term that means part per million. Just for giving you an idea, 5 ppm means 0.0005%. So you see, it's a very, very, very small amount of gas. And you see how dangerous is carbon monoxide, because also so small amount of gas, of contamination, may affect you, may affect your health. Then there is carbon dioxide, that is 500 ppm, higher, that is more or less the amount that you have in open air. Of course, if you are in the middle of the ocean, in the Maldives, you have 300. If you are downtown Milan or New York, you may have 1,000 ppm as a basic level. But anyway, this is what the norm says. The oil mist, the vapor of oil, must be below 0.5 milligram per cubic meter. No taste, no odor, and the air should be also without vapor of water, because water is not dangerous for health, but may affect the mechanics of the regulator of the delivery system. So this is why you need to be careful also about air. Okay, next, please. Okay, the US Navy Diving Manual, the 0.43.1 and the PADI standard, they have this limit that are quite similar. They just have higher limit for the carbon monoxide, that is 10 ppm, and a higher limit for the carbon dioxide, that is 1000 ppm. But at the end of the day, then Alessandro will explain, is not so different gap between the two norms, but it is something that must be taken in consideration. So you see the carbon monoxide is 10 ppm, meaning 0.001% of the contaminant. No odor, no taste. Water the same, 24 ppm, or dew point, meaning the temperature of freezing of the gas, of the air. But these are limits that are really used in very, very technical situation. And then VOC, that means the volatile organic compound, meaning oil mist or methane or any other hydrocarbon that may contaminate the air. Mauro, next, please. You see that also the UNI 11366 stays the same, 10 ppm for carbon monoxide, methane, and acetylene, carbon dioxide 500 ppm, oil mist is lower than 20 milligram per cubic meter, oxygen between 19.5 and 22%. Okay, but here in this table, I'm playing and I'm showing you how many regulations that are running now just in the US. For instance, in the US, you will see that all the column is a different specification for a compressed, and are stated all the contaminants that may be allowed, and also the time between control that must be done for releasing a certification of a compressor, of a gas compressor. Okay, so let's talk about now carbon monoxide. So carbon monoxide, we will see later why it's so dangerous. Alessandro will help us in well understanding. And mainly, why and how is built up the carbon monoxide. The worst thing of carbon monoxide, it is a totally odorless and tasteless gas. So you definitely don't understand that there is any carbon monoxide in your cylinder, in your air, in your ambient that you are using. Carbon monoxide is produced by the inefficient combustion of hydrocarbons in order that you have carbon monoxide instead of carbon dioxide. So it is made because a high temperature air goes on carbon and creates some part of carbon monoxide. That could happen also in the electrical driven compressor, not only in the engine, in the petrol engine compressors or air compressor, because the oil that is in the lubricant of the mechanic of the compressor may go on the filters with carbon, with the carbon that are the active carbon that is used for filtering, and may produce some carbon monoxide that we have seen how small amount is. So it's possible having this. This happens, for instance, in the not well run compressor, not well serviced, where are some issues with the temperature of the sensor of the third stadium of the compressors, or for instance for the filters that are not well maintained. So this is extremely important to keep the compressor well maintained. Or another source maybe is the exhaust gas coming from an endothermal engine. That means a petrol or diesel engine. That maybe you are in the middle of the sea and you have a boat running around, and the compressor sucks some gas, some contaminant. It goes into the compressor. It goes into your dive cylinders. Another way of producing is a cracking of oil residual in a diving cylinder. If the diving cylinders are not clean, if there is any moisture, any moisture or any oil left from previous filling, and if you leave the cylinder for long time in the diving center, then when you analyze, you find some part of carbon monoxide because of that, because there is this cracking of the molecular, and then you have this kind of issue in your cylinder. Another source are the smokers. I like the smokers because I remember couple of months ago, I was called by the Navy saying, "Hey, Eugenio, we have one of your analyzers connected to our hyperbaric chambers, and there are two men inside, two operators inside, and then we are detecting some carbon monoxide inside. How is possible? There were no carbon monoxide in the gas. We analyzed it. It's good." And then we discovered that the carbon monoxide came from the breathing of the operator. One of them was a smoker, and the smokers have some carbon monoxide in the lungs, and so they released this carbon monoxide in the ambient, and then you have this kind of poisoning that you can detect. That of course is not nice. So right, carbon monoxide kills you. Be safe, be careful. The carbon monoxide doesn't give you any chance. If you got in poisoning of this gas, you will go in very, very bad trouble. Alessandro, please, can you tell something more about the carbon monoxide and what's happening, what we can do for protecting ourselves, please? Mauro, go the next, please. Alessandro, sorry, your voice is over.
You named it with the right name.
Okay.
We've got just one appendix. It's a silent, odorless killer. That's the point. In actual fact, carbon monoxide poisoning, frequently acronymized as COP, is actually one of the most common worldwide medical problems. It's way the most frequent gas intoxication around the world, especially in underdeveloped countries where you can have some coal run heating systems or well-maintained water boilers, gas operated, because you can have, in all those cases, that sort of incomplete combustion that Eugenio was mentioning. And when you have incomplete combustion, instead of producing CO2 and water vapor, you end up having CO in the environment or being released. We are divers, so we also have to face changing pressures, and gas behave according to the changes of pressure. And you are very familiar with the concepts of partial pressure and the equivalent environmental pressure. And you know that the more gas you have, the more percentage or the more ppm or whatever it is. But ppm is another way to describe a percentage presence of any molecule in a mix. So you are very familiar with the fact that we divers do not need to rely only on percentage. We need to rely on the product of percentage by the environmental pressure, because that actually causes what? An increase in partial pressure. And the increase in partial pressure of a gas increases its diffusivity, its diffusion into the tissues. So, number one, if we have a contaminated gas mixture and we dive, the percentage that might be harmless at surface may not be so harmless at depth, just because of the increased partial pressure of the same gas. When talking about CO, we have to think about another thing, which is very important. And I sort of joked, played around with words in this slide, starting from the title, and how sexy can a gas analysis be. We have a love affair here between carbon monoxide and hemoglobin, the heme, the red blood cells, because red blood cells, or CO, love each other very, very much. They love each other more than 300 times the love between normal oxygen and hemoglobin and red blood cells, which means that if you have CO, the O2 lover is simply kicked out of the door, because hemoglobin prefers by far CO, carbon monoxide. But carbon monoxide is not oxygen. And so if the hemoglobins, if the red blood cells absorb, take up carbon monoxide instead of oxygen, what will we end up with? That the cells will not receive oxygen. So we end up with cellular tissue hypoxia. And if our cells do not receive oxygen, they don't work. They don't have the fuel that is necessary for their engine, internal engines, the mitochondria, the respiration of the cells, to work, actually, and to produce the energy that we need to live. So when breathing excessive quantities of carbon monoxide, we actually incur the risk of cellular hypoxia. And so you will understand what is in the middle part of the slide, because you may have a variety of symptoms depending on the amount and the duration of exposure. Because the more the amount and the more the duration, the more CO links with hemoglobin and the less oxygen is delivered to our tissues. So you will not be surprised by hearing me saying that you can have any kind of symptom, from absence of symptoms if the monoxide, the carbon monoxide presence is negligible or minimal, to any symptom that can vary from slight tiredness, some headache, weakness, nausea, vertigo, visual problem, loss of consciousness, coma, and death. And all this happens without any alert. All this happens without warning signs like you may have when you breathe excess carbon dioxide, for example, because carbon monoxide does not give you the pre-alert that carbon dioxide normally gives you. And as I said, every organ, every single organ can be affected, both in an acute way, but mind you, also in a chronic modality, because this cellular hypoxia may cause long-lasting effects, which may even become of psychological type or order. And actually, it is very frequent to have what we call the post-intervallar symptoms in chronic carbon monoxide poisoning, with serious disturbances, essentially neurological or cardiological. And you understood the mechanism, and this is the ill-love affair between carbon monoxide and hemoglobin. Next slide, please. So what can we do? We have to replace the ill lover with a good one. And the good lover is oxygen. But we have to replace oxygen in large quantities because we have carbon monoxide affinity to tissues and to hemoglobin, which is, as I said, 300 times more than the one of oxygen for the same molecules of hemoglobin. So we have to promptly and generously administer oxygen to cast away the unwanted lover from the blood, the cells, and the organs. CO, carbon monoxide, is actually washed out even by returning to breathe normal, pure air. So even when you resume breathing air, the carbon monoxide actually washes out from the hemoglobin and from the cells. But this is a very, very slow process. And therefore, the hypoxic damage to cell, the damage that derives from cellular hypoxia, is very frequent. If you increase the quantity of breathed oxygen to 100%, for example, in normal baric oxygen, the washout will be greatly, significantly accelerated. And if you provide not only 100% oxygen, but also hyperbaric oxygen, that is increasing the partial pressure of the oxygen, this effect will be even better. So we as divers should know that oxygen is not only useful for us to treat bubbles and DCI, but it can be very, very useful also to start any treatment in case we suspect or we incur into a carbon monoxide poisoning. The last paragraph of this slide is just to give you some numbers. We normally in medicine talk about half-life, and half-life is the same as our beloved half-times. So if the time needed to reduce or to increase a concentration of 50%. So if we want to reduce carbon monoxide concentration in our hemoglobin by 50% of the initial value, it will take 300 minutes if we breathe air, which means 5 hours. It takes only 90 minutes if we breathe oxygen, 100% oxygen at normal at atmospheric pressure, that is normal baric oxygen. But it can take down to 35 minutes if we breathe oxygen at 2.5 ATA, and only 22 minutes if we breathe oxygen at 3 ATA, with the further advantage that we will also have a lot of dissolved oxygen in our fluid, in our plasma, and so we will actually oxygenate the tissues indirectly without the help of hemoglobin, while restoring the normal function of hemoglobin. And these are dramatic numbers. And this is the reason and the rationale behind the regular first aid of carbon monoxide poisoning, which is 100% oxygen at normal baric pressure, that is at atmospheric pressure, but then hyperbaric oxygen at increased environmental pressure, either 2.5 or actually 3 atmospheres absolute. So the depth equivalent of 20 meters in the hyperbaric chamber. Clearly, if we are speaking about the possibility of chronic effects, long-term effects that are linked to the length of exposure to the poisonous gas, to the toxic gas, the least the exposure time, the faster the washout, the better for the final outcome of the poisoning victim. So I think that these numbers should really tell you why it is it's a very smart thing to know how much carbon monoxide, besides all the other contaminants, you have in your tanks and in your breathing mixtures, whether it's an open circuit or a closed circuit system. And I give the stage back to Eugenio.
Oh, thank you, Sandro. Oh, you were very, very clear. I really understood better what's happening, and I'm a bit scared, you know. And I don't know you, Michael, what you think, but really, when I think that I can see, I can smell, I can think that could be some carbon monoxide, I'm very, very, scared about what could happen. But not only because of the medical fact, also because it's a silent killer. Because you don't have any symptoms, you don't have any advice, and then it just happens. And then when you got that, you are done. That's very, very bad, very bad. But anyway,
I was surprised by the half times that it takes that long to wash it out of your system, even on 100% oxygen at the surface, 90 minutes just to remove half of it. So that's
very good. That's very good to know. And thanks, Alessandro, because you were the first that were pushing using oxygen as a first aid emergency for any kind of emergency. I remember I attended to my first DAN course, oxygen provider. It was around 20, 30 years ago, more or less. And then
we started in 1993, actually.
Okay, so I did exactly, so 28 years ago. Okay, I am an oxygen service provider, I remember. And then since then we knew that oxygen is the first aid that is the best you can do for avoiding any worse scenario. And then no matter if it's bend, if it is decompression sickness or carbon monoxide poisoning, just keep oxygen whenever you have any kind of symptom. I believe, Alessandro, that when you have an emergency running, the first thing you say to the patient, whatever it is, to breathe oxygen, not else.
Well, imagine the case of a diver who surfaces from a dive and go back one slide, Mauro, please. Back one, okay.
Dietro, scusa.
Back, dietro. Okay, and complains about some headache, some weakness, some nausea, vertigo, and some headache. And even visual problems. You may well think of a decompression illness, minor or major that it can be, but it might be carbon monoxide poisoning. So you are treating according to the common standards with oxygen, and even if it is carbon monoxide poisoning, you will be doing the right thing, and you will be starting the therapeutic cycle correctly, because it will be then continued at the hospital with higher concentrations of oxygen and possibly also with hyperbaric oxygen.
Thank you, Sandro. I'm very, very happy about that. Also because we were asked, to give some statistics. So how often you can be affected by carbon monoxide, And we asked Alessandro, why don't we do a survey? It's very difficult, Alessandro. Is it because it's sometimes the symptoms are so mixing, are so swapped with the others that you cannot really know where the problem is, and then you cannot say exactly, it was carbon monoxide, it was decompression, it was something else.
There is no way to do anything like that unless you have data. For decompression illness, we start having data by the real-time online deco risk analysis that we are using to analyze our data, and that divers also can use in real time by using the Dan Europe Diving Safety Guardian, Diver Safety Guardian, the DSG software, which is freely available. But there is nothing like that online or in real time regarding gas purity or safe air, safe gas standards. Mm-hmm. And this is why it is important to add the normal measurement of the quality of the gas we breathe before and even after any dive, because that could help what we doctors call differential diagnosis, because it adds data, and data means knowledge. If you have data that support the symptomology, then you know better what to do.
Thank you, Alessandro. You're right. Yeah. And that is something that we really need to do in the future, Michael. I believe that we need to start doing something, because we need to start having a statistics on how many times you got some carbon monoxide. And luckily, I would like to have this in advance, before diving. So you check your gas and then you do the statistics, not before when an accident happened, you know. That would be nice.
Before and after is the correct way.
Correct.
Eugenio, I have an idea about that we'll talk about. I'm reminded of this is with COVID, those, I forget the brand name, but it's a temperature stick. And you put it in, but it's internet connected. So it takes your temperature and then uploads it to the cloud. So you can actually look and see something like this with carbon monoxide. Might be very interesting on your sensor.
Michael, you're asking for it now. I anticipate that we are producing, we have tested the prototype of a real-time physiological monitor before, during, and after the dive, that transmits things through acoustic modems, so it can send data packs through the water to a transponder on the surface. And once you're at the surface, you are in the internet, you know, so you're connected everywhere. And now we are also studying a modality. We were just discussing this the other day at the Y40 pool in Padua with our bioengineer. We are discussing the possibility to measure also exhaled carbon monoxide, not only oxygen and carbon dioxide, which is possible through infrared analyzer, you know, the light analyzer. And we use that sort of instrumentation with electrocardiogram stress tests and so on to measure oxygen consumption and carbon dioxide production. So it's not absolutely impossible. This is something that we are working at, for example. Nice. It would be similar to have an online gas analyzer as you actually dive. So it would add the missing part, which is during the dive. But this is a bit far in time, but we're getting there more sooner.
That's great. That's great, Sandro. Anyway, thank you, Alessandro, also for that, because, you know, we have this kind of technology. And thank you for Mauro for going back to the presentation. Because go to the next, please, Mauro. Because I would like to say why we designed our gas analyzer, our DeoxSafe, that is the carbon monoxide analyzer. We did that because we found out that there were many fatal accidents around the world, and nobody knew why. And but sometimes after the accident report, the police were testing the gas that were contained in the cylinder that were used by the accident during the accident, and they found out that there were some oxygen, some carbon monoxide. They said, why it's possible? Because when you go to diving and then you are using a cylinder coming from another diving center, for instance, and they gave you the contaminant, the air contaminated, the next dive you do, and then you fill with a good compressor, the air keep being contaminated, you know. So this is why. And then we decided to do some personal safety monitor that would be fully mobile, easy to use and easy to maintain. So so we have this kind of analyzer. You know, I don't want to push too much, but you know, with this kind that costs just a few $100, and then you can save, you can be very, very safe on your side, because they are very useful, they are very easy, and then they have also the ability to give you alarm in case of something. And the new generation of this analyzer is also, Michael, have also the Bluetooth connection, so they can go online, and then you can see if there is any contamination. Then we can start doing the data collection of the analysis and of the frequency of carbon monoxide poisoning. You know, it's very easy. You know, when you go, there is some carbon monoxide, the unit can go to alarm, you know, and then can alert you. Now I'm tricking with an oxygen analyzer, you see, and then you see the alarm that warned you about the possibility of being poisoned, you know. And let me spend also a couple of words about our company, because now we can you go 15 alla 15? We had we as a TMC, we did our company 25 years ago. We established our company 25 years ago just for designing diving analyzer made for diving, not for medical or for industrial, but just made for diving. And then since then we developed the instruments, and now we are able to detect any kind of gas: carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, helium, oxygen, of course, methane, H2S, humidity, pressure. So any kind of analyzer, Alessandro, can help also your project. And then I know that you are using our analyzer for the air quality management in the diving center, for certifying the air quality. And then also many of our partners in the world use our analyzers. We have one of our partners that is Nuvair in the US. They are deeply involved in the air quality, in the manufacturing of compressing systems, both for hyperbaric and for medical use. And we are very proud that we can deliver now in a very easy way our products. Just let me spend 1 minute. Can you go back? Can you go ahead, please? To the 17, 17, please, because we have this very easy unit that you see. You connect easily to the cylinder, and then you turn on the unit, and then you flow a small amount of gas, and then you have the reading, a very small reading. Michael, don't forget that the limit that we are talking about, 5-10 ppm, is a very, very low limit. So you need a sensor that is calibrated properly, because there are other instruments. Luckily, we are not the only one that produce this kind of analyzers, of course, but there are very few in the world, because the most common analyzers are made for detecting 1000 ppm. You mean 0.1%. That means that our limit that we have in our industry is very low, and then we need a proper calibrated sensor. Of course, the analyzer must have a long life sensors. They must be fully mobile with a rechargeable battery or with a replaceable battery. You need to replace the sensor, because if you are in the middle of the sea during the live bore, you need to use the analyzer, and then you need to use that for a long time, you know. And also we have another. Go to the next, please, Mauro. We have also other analyzers that is integrated, you know, for the possibility to integrate with carbon dioxide, helium, any other kind of contaminant that we can use for that. So
this second unit, Eugenio, this is like for a dive center, right? It would be
correct.
Integrated into their blending system.
Correct. or maybe integrated in the compressors. Many of our partners like Nuver integrated this into the panel, and then on the side of the compressor, on the side of the chamber, or the hyperbaric chamber, can detect the poisoning and what's happening, you know. And then, of course, there are also many technology, because Alessandro before was mentioning the infrared sensors, and carbon monoxide can be detected both with infrared sensors or electrochemical sensors. Both of them have pros and cons. For carbon monoxide, we prefer the electrochemical, because they are very easy to maintain, very long life. We are talking about 4 years, or also 6 years of life of the sensor without replacing, and very, very easy to check if it is working. You know, we do that as a joke among friends. You know, if you get a friend that is smoking and then you let breathe inside the analyzer, you will see some carbon monoxide content that is more than 10 ppm. That means that you have more, because a smoker, and Alessandro can tell me better, that retain the carbon monoxide in the lungs, and then can breathe out, and then they can produce, you know, they can produce in the air. And this is why we use this kind of sensor, very, very sensitive. And also now the technology is going with the Bluetooth connection, is going with, for instance, this analyzer, the big one, the multi-gas, is already equipped with the Bluetooth, so it can communicate to your smartphone, and then you can see what's happening in the gas, and they can go on the internet for broadcasting around the data, the collection of data. You know, that's the technology is running. Yeah, please.
Eugenio, just to clarify, so what? Obviously, people always need to analyze their gas for their oxygen content, helium, whatever their mix is. But you're saying, in addition to that, you should analyze your gas to make, and particularly in certain parts of the world, analyze your gas to make sure there's no carbon monoxide in it.
Correct.
So it's
Absolutely.
a second analysis of your gas before you die.
That must be also because, you know, there are regulations that allows you, you know, says that your compressor must be compliant with the norm. But when you do when the technician goes and services the compressor, they just do a shot. A picture of that time that the compressor is going well. But what could happen after, you know, 1 week or 1 month after the test, and maybe because the compressor is very stressed, is keeping running for a long time, for instance, because they are serving a lot of people diving, and then the compressor after 5, 6, 7 hours of interrupted work can start eating the gas, start warming up the gas. That is the worst period in which also a good compressor or a well-maintained compressor, maybe with a filter that is not going well, may produce some carbon monoxide. That's the moment that you must be aware. And this is why we suggest, you know, all the people to have their own monitor, at least in the diving center. And unfortunately, it's not so common, Michael. In the world, then we will talk about our experience. It's very, very common that you go diving in a place and then you get some carbon monoxide. Not in a death zone, you know, it's not so high, but it means that there is some carbon monoxide that may affect your health, and that is not good, you know, because you go diving for having fun, not for having a problem.
Right.
Okay.
So we have some questions gathering. So maybe Eugenio,
yes,
why don't
please.
you finish
Mauro,
the
go ahead,
presentation,
please.
and we'll get to questions.
Mauro, please. Go ahead. Okay, we would like, before, please. We would like to thank all our supporters, the PADI, RIDE, Global, Underwater Explorer, GUE, ESA, SDI, and, you know, all our organizations that made possible to do this kind of event, because it was spread around the internet. I would also to thank our supporter Nuver in the US, and of course all of our customers that made possible us to deliver and to continuously research and develop new products. Okay, so thank you, Michael.
So so we'll open it up for some questions. maybe starting out, why is the EN standard for carbon monoxide half that of the U.S. Navy and other standards?
Thank you for this question.
Converse, why are we more than the EN standard?
Yeah, no, this is a trick story. Before in 2014, before 2014, the norm, the EN 12021, stated 15 ppm. You know, 3 times now. And in the around 2011, it was made a revision of the norm, and then it was kept down to 5 ppm. Just because we are not talking about a dangerous or a very, very bad situation in gas concentration, but because because of safety. Because whenever you have some point of carbon monoxide, it is very easy that the contamination can grow up very fast, in a very fast way. So it is better to warm at 4 ppm, 5 ppm, rather than having 15 or 20 ppm. That is not lethal, you know, it's not yet a very dangerous concentration, but it is still saying that there is something that is you have to take care of. Understand? This is the reason.
We have a question too, asking about what rate of carbon monoxide is critical in the gas and how this depends on partial pressures. So let me try to start with that. So at the surface, having less than 5 ppm or 10 ppm means that the partial pressure we're breathing at 1 atmosphere is safe. But now if you make a dive, let's say you're at, 6 ATA, 10 ATA, that partial pressure is going to increase. And that's why we keep the ppm low to begin with, because it's going to increase when we go underwater, the partial pressure.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Alessandro, I believe that.
Michael answered.
Yeah, okay.
yeah, you're right.
We also had a question about treatment, putting someone on hyperbaric oxygen for treatment of carbon monoxide. Would this create problems in terms of oxygen toxicity or pulmonary toxicity, etc.? Alessandro, what do you?
As we all know, pulmonary oxygen toxicity as well as neurological oxygen toxicity are time-related, time and pressure-related. So clearly, the more you are exposed to critical pressures, the more you're exposed to pulmonary oxygen toxicity, but that does not regard the relative shortness of a hyperbaric treatment session, which may, on the contrary, affect a patient by with a neurological oxygen toxicity episode. But clearly, these things are done in highly specialized centers where the patients are fully monitored and so on. Definitely, it's not advisable to use a deck decompression chamber that you may have on a diving vessel, because this would mean treating a medically critical patient or potentially medically critical patient. So that has not to be done. It was information for you to know why oxygen is important and what is the rationale behind hyperbaric oxygen administration. But even if you start providing normal baric oxygen, 100% oxygen at 1 ATA, as you have seen, you start the treatment in active fact. So
thank you, Sandro.
Whenever you use oxygen, we call oxygen a cardinal substance. A cardinal substance is typical, this adjective is typical of a substance that you cannot live without, but you cannot live with too much.
Right.
The bad, the ugly, yeah, remember oxygen.
Alessandro, we have a question, what is the upper limit for CO for us? And I think what they mean is when do we start to see symptoms from carbon monoxide?
Very variable. it's individual. It's very much individual. There are people who can have a slight headache or feel weak, and people who can do without any symptom, even if exposed to higher concentrations. So there is actually, of course, if you breathe, I don't know, 1,000 or 10,000 ppm, you will be out of conscious very, very soon.
Mhm.
Actually, the few cases we had, 3 of them were fatal at bottom. The death was almost immediate after they reached the higher pressure.
Yeah.
Because there was a combination between high concentration and high partial pressure, as you said properly. So I think that whatever is, let's say, double the admitted limit, because the admitted limits are relatively safe. But whatever, when you start doubling up that limit according to either the EN standards or the American standards, you are in a trouble area.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Interesting.
Yeah, you're right.
So we have a question here. When you analyze the gas, when should we change the tank? So maybe this question is, if you find there is carbon monoxide in your cylinder, then you have to, does the tank need to be cleaned at that point, emptied and cleaned before it's used again? What do you do if you detect carbon monoxide?
Generally, you know, when let me answer, Alessandro. Of course, it's like you are offering you something that is not good for diving, like a faulty regulator or something like that. You don't dive. You know, if you detect that there is some carbon monoxide over the limit, is not safe, you know, diving. And then, of course, the best you can do is to drain, to take out all the air from the cylinder and ask for a new cylinder, of course. And because, you know, there is no, as Alessandro was saying, there is no limit, a fixed limit. You can say 10, 15 or 50 or 100 or 200. Okay, if you breathe 1,000, probably you will go dying in a very short time. But you know, the best you can do is to avoid breathing carbon monoxide at all. You know, that is why.
Eugenio, let me say that you don't want it. So if you see it, you avoid it.
Right.
Yeah, you're right, Alessandro.
So we have a couple questions.
A normally functioning compressor does not deliver CO in any significant quantity. Or
correct.
Therefore, normal tanks should not have CO inside. That's it. So if you see something, if the needle or the display starts moving when you analyze for CO, well, you better stay safe.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
so
you,
we have a couple questions again about analysis. So I think and correct me if I'm wrong, but the procedure should be, if you're going to get your gas from the dive center, you need to analyze your gas when you get it and before you dive. And you'd have an oxygen analyzer if you're breathing nitrox to analyze your nitrox. If you're doing a tech dive with trimix or something, you'd have your analyzer for that. You should analyze your gas before every dive. What we're saying is, in addition to analyzing your oxygen and helium for your dive, you should also be analyzing it for carbon monoxide as well. So
and for any contaminants, because what Eugenio mentioned was also water vapor and oil mist. Now these things, either water vapor, especially when there is oil mist, they can cause pneumonia. And you can have serious cases of pulmonary disease. Actually, it's almost a pulmonary injury. It's a lipid pneumonia that can be favored if there is also too much water vapor, too much mist. If you have too much mist, it's very likely that the filters of the compressor are not that good also for oil. So, in other words, we go underwater. We're not built to breathe water. We carry what we want to breathe. And that is our source of life. Don't we want to have a clean source of life?
Yeah,
Yes.
you're right. Yeah,
Absolutely.
but yeah, Michael, don't worry, because now are available the analyzers also for oil. We do analyze, we do manufacture oil analyzer and oil sensors. We have both a standalone oil sensor or integrated oil sensor that could be put inside
Gotcha.
inside the multi-gas, So, and then we can use the analyzer or during the filling process. If the analyzer is integrated, it can be easily put on the side of the compressor, or as a mobile unit. It's a group, a diving group, have his own one, and then they make the analysis before diving. It's very easy to do. It's very, very inexpensive doing this, Michael.
Last question, because I think we're out of time here, but let me ask last question. I'm going to combine two questions for both of you. How big of a problem is carbon monoxide for divers, and what's the best practice? Should we analyze this every time, everywhere? Are there certain geographic areas where if we're traveling and diving there, we should make sure to analyze for contaminants? What is your recommendation overall?
Epidemiologically speaking, carbon monoxide poisoning is by far one of the most common poisoning in the world outside of water. And it affects generally third world underdeveloped countries where maintenance is an issue, and heating with rudimental procedures is a habit. And of course, also culture and education is lacking. Therefore, you can see those filling stations and diving centers that when you see it, you would react like when you see HIV. If I see it, I avoid it. So be careful of how safety conscious are the people that you dive with, because that brings an inherent risk in it of missing control, let's say, and lack of awareness of the problem. As to how frequent it is in diving, well, fortunately, it's not so frequent, but I don't know whether it's not frequent because the proper analysis is not done on fatal or close to fatal accidents or with normal accidents, and it comes up only when it's really a tragedy like the one we had in the Mediterranean 5 years ago with three fatalities. Actually, the entire diving group died. So it's not as common amongst divers as it is amongst the population.
Gotcha.
But we don't know. We don't know because we lack data. So probably if we were more extensively applying a safety measure to analyze the gas we breathe, then probably we would have more data, and probably this would end up being not so infrequent. Also, another word of caution that Eugenio mentioned, please understand that it's not only the compressor, the source of compressed gas, that you have to be careful of. It's also the container, because the container may be contaminated by itself. And it can have percentages or ppms of undesired contaminants from previous use. So this is one of the reasons for which you both need to control the source of compressed gas that you are getting your gas from and the container that you are using.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then Mike, just let me add something, to what Alessandro told. It's I had an episode I would like to share with you. It happened last year, 2 years ago, sorry, in Russia. Where a friend of mine, our distributor in Russia, called me, Eugenio, well, look at what happened. With this multi-gas, he detected 150 ppm of carbon monoxide in this rebreather cylinder, and he was a rebreather with helium. You mean it was a helium and oxygen mix, and I shortened the story. The carbon monoxide came from the helium cylinder, pure helium cylinder that were used before for soldering, and it was containing argon. Because argon gas contains 1%, that means 10,000 ppm of carbon monoxide, because it's used for increasing the flame temperature during the soldering. And so if the cylinder was not well drained, and then when they filled up with the helium, they got some around 300, 400 ppm of carbon monoxide in the cylinder of helium. So they were putting the helium through a booster into the cylinder, and they will go diving with 150 ppm of carbon monoxide. Luckily, they were using one analyzer, and then they stopped breathing that gas, and then of course breathing also helium. So it is not so uncommon as you can think, Michael. Really.
Yeah. Thank you, Eugenio. I think we're out of time now. Again, I want to thank all of you for coming to the webinar. I want to thank our supporters for supporting this, and hope we can improve diving safety. That's what it's all about, and so we can go out and have a good time and come back to talk about it. So thank you very much.
Thank you,
Dr. Marroni. Thank you, Eugenio. Grazie. Thank you, everybody.
Grazie, Michael. Grazie, Sandro.
Scary but illuminating.
There you go.